Ever notice how some guys act like their whole world revolves around getting laid?
Yeah.
Like it's their mission in life?
Mm-hmm.
We've got this Reddit thread
Okay.
from Ask Men Advice
Mm-hmm.
where a guy asks
Yeah.
point blank,
Uh-huh.
why are some men so desperate for sex
Okay.
that they'd risk their integrity for it?
Wow.
He contrasts that with his own preference for,
Right.
a productive routine over just a random hookup.
Right.
And I thought it was a fascinating question.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And the responses get really deep.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
It is a good one.
So what's so fascinating about it?
Well, I think what's fascinating about this thread is it really challenges this stereotype of
Right.
men just being completely focused on one thing.
Yeah.
You see a real diversity of perspectives,
Mm.
even within this specific online community.
Right.
It's really interesting.
So this guy who starts the thread,
yeah.
he seems genuinely puzzled
Yeah.
by guys who don't.
Right. Feel the same way he does.
Mhm.
So what are some of the explanations
Oh, there are a lot.
that came up in the thread?
Well, right off the bat, a lot of the responses push back on the idea that it's just purely about the physical act.
Right.
Several men talk about this deeper desire for connection,
Yeah.
for emotional intimacy, or just feeling wanted and loved.
There's this one comment that really stood out to me
Yeah.
where a guy's saying that he just wants to feel something,
Wow.
even if it's fleeting,
Yeah.
because, quote, the world is cruel and unloving.
Oh, that's sad.
It's kind of heavy,
Yeah.
but it makes you think.
Yeah, it does.
So
Yeah.
it's a powerful statement, right?
It is.
It speaks to that fundamental human need for touch
Yeah.
and connection.
Connection for sure.
And, when you think about it,
Yeah.
from a psychological perspective,
Right.
touch deprivation can have serious consequences.
Absolutely.
I mean, we are
Humans are.
social creatures,
Yes.
wired for connection.
So
Yeah.
maybe for some guys, pursuing sex
Yeah.
is less about the physical pleasure
Right.
and more about
Yeah.
fulfilling that basic human need for contact.
That's definitely a factor for many,
Uh-huh.
but it's not the whole story.
Right.
Another recurring theme in the thread is this idea of
Okay.
sex being tied to validation,
Uh-huh.
especially for younger men.
Yeah, a lot of guys talk about
Yeah.
feeling like getting laid is proof of their worth.
Right, like it validates their masculinity or desirability.
It's like a scorecard almost.
It is like a
Yeah.
scorecard.
Yeah.
And this is where I think societal pressures really come in.
Right.
We live in a culture that
Yeah.
often bombards men
Mm-hmm.
with these messages about needing to be sexually successful
Mm-hmm.
to be considered real men.
Yeah.
And this can create a lot of insecurity,
Right.
especially for those who are
Yeah.
less experienced or
Yeah.
confident.
There's this really insightful comment from an older man
Okay.
who says that's exactly how he felt
Yeah.
when he was younger.
Mm.
He was seeking validation from
Right.
external sources because he wasn't getting it
Yeah.
from other areas of his life.
That's a common pattern.
Right.
When we lack a strong sense of self-worth,
Mm.
we may seek that validation from outside.
Mm-hmm.
And for some men, that manifests
Yeah.
in this pursuit of sex.
Right.
But the problem is, this can become a vicious cycle.
Oh, absolutely.
The more desperate they are for that validation,
Wow.
the less likely they are to find
Yeah.
genuine connection and intimacy,
Yeah.
which could actually provide that sense of worth they're craving.
That's a great point. And it actually ties into another thing that came up.
Yeah.
The guys who seem most obsessed with sex are often the ones who aren't actually having much of it.
Right. It's almost like the ones who can get it easily
Right.
aren't the ones putting their integrity on the line for it.
Exactly.
It really suggests that insecurity plays a major role. Yes.
In driving that desperation.
It's like that old saying, the loudest person in the room
Right.
is often the most insecure.
Exactly.
Right? They're overcompensating for something.
It's a form of overcompensation.
Yeah.
They're trying to project this image
Uh-huh.
of confidence and sexual prowess.
Right.
But underneath it all, there's this deep-seated fear of inadequacy.
Right.
But it's not just internal factors at play here.
Okay.
Some of the comments in the thread highlight the role of
Yeah.
upbringing and socialization.
There's this one comment from a guy who describes himself as a fat, nerdy kid
Okay.
who never even considered dating as a possibility growing up.
Wow.
He observes that guys who had early success with women might develop different approaches.
Yep.
Some less refined than others.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
This gets into the concept of social learning theory,
Okay.
which suggests that we learn social behaviors
Uh-huh.
by observing and imitating others.
So if a young man's early experiences with dating are negative,
Right.
or if he lacks positive role models,
Right.
he might develop unhealthy or ineffective ways of relating to women.
So we've got this complex interplay
That's complicated.
of insecurity,
Yeah.
social conditioning, the desire for connection and validation.
It's a lot.
But of course, we can't ignore the biological aspect.
Of course not. That's the foundation.
Right.
And the thread doesn't shy away from that either.
Yeah.
Several commenters bring up the simple fact that sex is a biological urge. It feels good.
It does.
It releases dopamine.
All those things.
It's a fundamental drive hardwired into us
Yeah.
for the survival of the species.
Makes sense.
From an evolutionary standpoint,
Uh-huh.
men who were driven to seek out
Right.
multiple sexual partners
Yeah.
were more likely to pass on their genes.
Right. So there's a biological basis
Yeah,
for the drive.
absolutely.
But does that mean we're just slaves to our instinct?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I mean, how do we reconcile that with everything else we've been talking about?
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because while biology lays the groundwork,
Yeah.
it doesn't dictate the whole story.
Right.
Our desires and behaviors are also shaped
Yeah.
by our thoughts,
Yeah.
emotions, and experiences.
Like, we're not just mindless robots running on hormones.
Yeah.
We have the capacity
Oh, dear.
to think critically
Absolutely.
and make conscious choices.
Exactly.
And several commenters in the thread
Yeah.
actually push back
Mm-hmm.
on that purely biological explanation.
Makes sense?
They argue that we're far more complex
Yeah.
than creatures driven solely by primal urges.
We are for sure.
One guy says it's nuts to be so fixated on sex
Yeah.
that you'd risk your integrity for it.
Yeah. I agree with him.
So
Yeah.
clearly there's more at play here.
There gotta be.
And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of this thread,
Uh-huh.
the comments that touch on asexuality.
Oh, yeah, that's an important one.
Right.
It is.
One guy suggests that the original poster's low interest in sex
Right.
could be indicative of being on the asexual spectrum.
It's a crucial point because it challenges this assumption
Right.
that everyone experiences sexual desire in the same way.
Right.
Asexuality is a valid sexual orientation, often defined as a lack of sexual attraction.
It makes you wonder, like,
Yeah.
what even is a normal level of interest in sex?
Right, exactly.
It seems like it varies
It does.
widely from person to person.
It does.
And the Reddit thread
Yeah.
really highlights that spectrum.
It does.
You've got guys who say they drop everything for a chance at sex.
Right.
Others who prioritize their routine and personal growth.
Uh-huh.
And then you have individuals who identify as asexual,
Yeah.
who may not experience sexual attraction at all.
That's the whole spectrum.
Yeah, it's like
Uh-huh.
this whole conversation is a reminder
Yeah.
that we need to be careful about making generalizations.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Human sexuality is incredibly complex and diverse.
Right.
And each individual's experience is unique.
Mm-hmm.
Reducing it to simple explanations or stereotypes
Yeah.
does a disservice to that complexity.
There's this other comment that stuck with me,
Yeah.
where a guy talks about how hard it is
Okay.
for some men to find connection in the romance realm. He says, sex feels good, but it's fleeting.
Right.
So they take it however they can get it
Yeah.
because they don't know when the next opportunity will come along.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like a scarcity mindset.
That's a great observation. And it's something that can be exacerbated by societal pressures and cultural norms. If a man feels like his worth is tied to his sexual conquests,
Right.
he may be more likely to engage in risky or unhealthy behavior
Yeah.
just to avoid feeling like he's missing out.
Yeah, it's like they're constantly chasing this elusive goal. And that desperation can lead them down some pretty unhealthy paths.
Yeah. It can also prevent them from developing genuine, meaningful connections.
Right.
If their focus is solely on the physical act of sex, they're missing out on the emotional intimacy and vulnerability that can come with a healthy relationship.
It's interesting. We've been focusing a lot on the men in this thread.
Right.
But there are some women who chime in as well.
Oh, really?
One woman says she's here for the answers.
Okay.
And another finds it refreshing
Interesting.
to hear a man prioritize self-improvement over chasing sex.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder that this isn't just a conversation happening among men.
Exactly.
Women are observing these patterns too, and they have their own thoughts and experiences
for sure.
to share.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
The need for connection,
Yeah.
validation seeking, insecurity, the role of upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
the biological drive,
Right. Yeah.
and even asexuality.
We did.
Anything we're missing?
Well, there's one more thread running through this conversation that I
Oh.
think is important to highlight.
Okay.
The impact of societal expectations of masculinity.
You mean this idea that men are supposed to be
Yeah.
these hypersexual beings
Right.
who are always on the hunt?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Several commenters point out
Uh-huh.
that this pressure to perform sexually
Yeah.
can be incredibly damaging.
Right.
It can lead to men feeling like they need to constantly prove their masculinity,
Right.
which can manifest in unhealthy ways, like
Yeah.
objectifying women
Ugh.
or engaging in risky sexual behavior.
One guy even says that guys who haven't healed from this idea
Right.
that they're worthless rejects
Yeah.
see sex as the ultimate validation.
Wow.
That's pretty heavy.
It is, and it highlights how deeply
Yeah.
these societal messages can impact
Mm-hmm.
men's self-esteem.
Yeah. And relationships.
So it makes you wonder,
It does.
if seeking validation through sex is a sign of insecurity,
Yeah.
what are healthy ways for men to feel confident and worthy?
That's a big question.
It is.
But some key factors that come to mind are,
Okay.
developing a strong sense of self-worth
Uh-huh.
that isn't contingent on external validation,
Right.
cultivating healthy coping mechanisms
Yeah.
for dealing with insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
and fostering open and honest communication
Yeah.
in relationships.
And of course, challenging
Right.
those harmful societal expectations of masculinity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's about creating a space where men can express their emotions freely,
Right.
embrace vulnerability,
Hmm.
and define their own sense of manhood.
Well said.
Yeah.
And I think this thread, as messy and complicated as it is a step in that direction.
Right.
Yeah, it's about creating a space where men can express themselves
Right.
and, feel comfortable being vulnerable.
And defining their own sense of manhood,
Yeah.
not having it defined for them by these external
So
forces.
it's been a fascinating conversation,
It has.
unpacking all these different perspectives
Yeah.
on why some guys seem so driven
Right.
by sex.
Yeah.
We've talked about the yearning for connection,
Mm-hmm.
the quest for validation, those societal pressures, and even the biological underpinnings.
Right.
But as we wrap up,
Yeah.
it's interesting to look at some of the more
Okay.
straightforward viewpoints that came up in the thread.
You're talking about the guys who essentially said sex is awesome.
Exactly.
I'll take it whenever I can get it.
There were quite a few comments
Okay.
that took a more matter-of-fact,
Yeah.
biological approach to the whole thing.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
The drive to reproduce is fundamental to the survival of any species.
Right.
From an evolutionary perspective,
Uh-huh.
men who were driven to seek out
Right.
multiple sexual partners would have had a greater chance of passing on their genes.
So on a basic level,
Yeah,
there's a biological basis for this drive.
absolutely.
But does that mean we're all just slaves to our instincts?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It's tempting to reduce it to that,
Right.
but humans are far more nuanced.
Right.
Yes, the biological urge is there,
Mm-hmm.
but how it manifests
Yeah.
is shaped by so much more.
Yeah.
Our thoughts,
Mhm.
our emotions, our experiences,
Yeah.
our culture,
Right.
it all plays a role.
So we're not just mindless robots running on hormones.
Yeah,
We have the capacity
we do.
to make choices.
For sure.
And some of the guys in the thread
Yeah.
actually push back
Uh-huh.
on that purely biological explanation.
Makes sense.
They argue that we're capable
Right.
of complex thought and decision-making.
Absolutely.
We can choose how we respond to those biological urges.
Totally.
One guy even compares it to enjoying a drink.
Okay.
He says, I like having a drink, but I don't race to the liquor store after work.
I like. Right.
That's good.
It's about finding a healthy balance.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of self-control
Right.
and making conscious choices about our behavior.
And it reminds me of another interesting point
Okay.
that came up.
Mm-hmm.
One guy mentions that he used to be
Yeah.
all about chasing sex until he started hooking up easily.
Okay.
And then when it was readily available,
Okay.
it stopped being such a big deal.
This speaks to the idea that scarcity
Yeah.
often fuels desire,
Right.
When something is constantly out of reach, we tend to crave it more.
Yeah.
But when it becomes readily available,
Right.
it can lose some of its allure.
It's like the classic forbidden fruit phenomenon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while the biological urge might be a constant,
Yeah.
our perception of sex and the intensity of our desire
Right.
can fluctuate based on a whole range of factors.
So this whole deep dive has been incredibly thought-provoking.
It has. You know, we've gone from dissecting those raw,
Yeah.
sometimes vulnerable confessions in the Reddit thread to exploring deep psychological and societal forces.
Absolutely.
You know, it really reinforces the idea
Yeah.
that there's no single, simple answer
Right.
to the question of why some guys seem so driven by sex.
It's a multifaceted issue.
Yeah.
Influenced by
Right.
biology,
Right.
psychology, social norms, personal experience,
Yeah.
everything in between.
It's complicated.
It is.
And each individual's journey is unique.
For sure.
So for our listeners,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways
Oh, that's a good question.
you'd want them to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we need to be careful about making sweeping generalizations
Right.
or judging individuals
Yeah.
based on their sexual behavior.
Right.
There's so much going on beneath the surface, and we need to approach these conversations with empathy and understanding.
Absolutely. And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
these kinds of open and honest discussions
Right?
can help us chip away at those harmful societal expectations
Absolutely.
that limit how men can express themselves.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's about creating a space where everyone can embrace their authentic selves,
Right.
regardless of where they fall on the spectrum of desire.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for our listeners, if you found this exploration of male sexuality intriguing,
Yeah.
be sure to subscribe to Voices of the Soul for more insightful discussions like this one.
Definitely.
We delve into all sorts of fascinating topics related to the human experience.
We do.
So,
Wow.
you know, if you're interested in
Yeah.
understanding the complexities
I'm
of
forgetting.
human behavior,
Right.
relationships, and the world around us,
All that good stuff.
make sure to hit that subscribe button
Yeah.
so you don't miss out on any future episodes.
We'd love to have you.
And don't forget to check out
Oh, yeah.
Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel
Yes.
for even more thought-provoking content.
She's amazing.
She dives deep into a wide range of subjects,
She does.
exploring the complexities of what it means to be human.
She's really good at it.
So if you're looking for more insightful and engaging content,
Absolutely.
be sure to check out her channel.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time.
See ya.